and welcome to the Worthy to Lead podcast. I'm your host, Christiana Corona, and I'm so excited that you decided to join us today because I have an exciting special guest joining me. Welcome to the show, Patty.
Well, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
So before we jump into our conversation, I did want to give you just a brief introduction so you can learn a little bit more about Patty and why I really wanted her to be here. So our guest, Patty Shull, is the founder of Leadership and Performance Company with over 15 years of experience in the competitive world of executive consulting and coaching and advising. Patty offers something unique in the leadership development space. She's a trusted advisor to multiple C-suite multinationals, and she also coaches small businesses. 4 of her clients set industry records thanks to the strategies that she brought to them about how they can lead their organizations differently. She's certified in a groundbreaking performance improvement method that was created by Dr. David McClelland, a Harvard University professor emeritus. And also, she's a certified contractor using Korn Ferry's executive assessments and programs. And I think what truly sets Patty apart is her unwavering commitment to craft. So I know that that will really resonate with this audience, as that is something that's really important to you all as well. And so she wasn't just striving for competence, she was really aiming for mastery. So this idea of virtuoso is something that's really new and interesting, and I'm excited to dive into it today. So we're going to talk about things from leading in the zone, so knowing how to draw that expertise when you need it, similar to maybe how you would see a jazz musician when they're just in the flow and they're just riffing and creating this beautiful music. We're going to talk about how she uses humor to break down barriers and open up important conversations. And then we're going to talk about why the best results for business actually happen when we're living in the present moment. And part of that is about being in our creative energy and letting go of the stress and the pressure of perfection. And that one is really important to me. So I'm super excited for this conversation. I think you're going to learn a lot. With that, let's dive in and talk to Patty.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm so glad to have you here. I really appreciate you taking time. I know you have a lot on your plate. So I'm just going to dive right in. If we could just have you to kick off, tell us a little bit more about your story and how you came to start the coaching and consulting business that you have today.
Well, it started at a very, very early age. In fact, I grew up in a multi-generational family business, and most of my aunts and uncles were entrepreneurs. So without even knowing it, I was being homeschooled in business and the operations of business and the importance of customer and strategy and profitability. And my mother was a bookkeeper, and I'd watch her downstairs going over the books. And so I was really immersed in work as family and family as work, because we really were. And we often talk about our work family and how close those relationships become. So, my grandfather was a beekeeper, and my father and grandfather and grandmother and siblings were in the retail grocery business. Another aunt and uncle were in the prosthetics business. They advised President Reagan on soldiers and rehabilitation. And another aunt and uncle, 2 aunt and uncles were farmers. So literally I was in the farm, shoveling cow manure, in milking cows, watching the operations of the milk go to the grocery stores.
Oh my goodness. I can really relate to that, being that I grew up with a family of entrepreneurs as well. They were artists. So definitely, small business owners doing all the things, trying to make ends meet, and learning hands-on what it looked like to run your own business. I think that's so valuable.
It totally was. And it was play. Like, oh, let's watch grandpa go out and get the bees. And still today, if you go to the Kansas City farmers market, you'll see a stone in the wall that says Mathis Bee Honey. So it was play as well.
You came up with this theory about leading from the zone. And the way I interpret it, and I would love to hear if I'm interpreting it correctly, is that leading from the zone is kind of like being in the flow, where you're just fully immersed in what you're doing creatively, and that helps you kind of transition from just being an expert to being something more than that, what you would call a virtuoso.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more about like what that is all about?
Yes. So, and I love this topic, being from the zone, living in the zone, working from the zone. So, the way there's so much literature out there on flow states, and it's all super helpful. What I saw is people would go into the zone and have great ideas, time would disappear, they'd be at their best. However, they had skipped some steps of actually being a fully competent or expert leader first.
Hmm.
So you can enter into the states of flow or the zone, but not have that foundation of competency as a leader. And that's where my studies with Dr. David McClellan, who is passed now, but he was professor emeritus at Harvard University. And the place that I start with all my clients is, have you ever been assessed as a competent or expert leader based on your impact on the P&L? Not a 360, not a competency, but I mean hard measures on the P&L. And very few leadership executive assessments were linked to Dr. McClellan's research that great leaders create great work climates. He didn't call it culture, he called it a great climate where 6 key criteria were met that allowed your employees or contractors to perform at their best and give you, guess what? Something called discretionary effort.
Hmm.
So when leaders can trigger those core motives, thoughts of their team by basically turn business into a game that
Mhm.
everybody wants to win and it's rewarding, then employees will give an extra discretionary effort, and then you can go on to set records or be the top division. And actually, if a leader scores high in all 6 of these criteria, they're actually an expert, because after assessing over 1,000 top executive director leaders, CEOs, the most I see is they get 5 out of the 6.
Hmm.
And so after you have that, you can go on to meet a situation, having learned that, and then improvising in the moment with situational awareness.
Hmm.
Not a formula, but every situation in the military, they call it situational awareness, because like the Navy SEALs go in, they prepare for a mission, they don't know what's going to happen. And leadership is the same way, right?
Hmm.
You've experienced that. You prepare, and then, oh my gosh, an investor walks in, or now the CEO walks in, or half my people aren't here and we have a deadline.
So that sixth competency is really the wild card. Really the like here's how you perform when everything is potentially different than what you had hoped or planned for.
And first key criteria is, are people clear on the vision, the mission, the strategy if they're director and higher, right? The OKRs or the KPIs, and then their role.
Mm-hmm.
So they need the clarity and the role. The third one is standards, which again, every upset can be traced to, I have this standard, my teammate has that standard, and our standards are in conflict. It takes a lot of conversations to get to that fundamental, but that's what it is. So, what is the standard of excellence? It could be 70%, right? Of agile, just send me a draft. No, I can't possibly send out half baked work. Remember when we went through that
Oh yeah.
transition? Standards, boy. So that's a third one. Then flexibility. Can I get to the goal with flexibility? Am I interrupted by bureaucracy? The fifth one is rewards. This is the one that, of the leaders who got the top 5 correct, they still miss out on rewards because they can't differentiate the difference between a compliment or let's go to lunch or bonus compensation for the conversation that says, when you did this, it helped produce this result. So the kind of, in this dimension, it's recognition of, it's like a learning organization. If you remember Peter Singh back in the day, just constantly talking about, oh, when you did this, it worked. So starting a meeting, what's working? Because how do I know my executive summary was really landed if I don't get that feedback?
That's amazing.
And the last one, just to comment, is trust.
Trust. Okay.
Like, do people trust that you are dedicated to the mission that you say you're about?
Okay. I'm just taking a couple notes here. So, so you said the first one is the clarity, the vision, mission, strategy, KPIs. The second one is role clarity. What am I responsible for? The third one is standard of excellence. And are my standards aligned to others' standards? Are they in conflict? The fourth one is flexibility. Can I get to a goal without the interruption of bureaucracy? I love that one a lot. The fifth one, rewards. Do I know what's going to move the needle on performance? And essentially, like, am I rewarding people for the thing that they most want in order to help them want to do more of that thing?
It
Right?
actually, and it actually gets into micro rewards or micro recognition, so that during the week, like the high performance teams had 5 times more conversations about what is working specifically than what's not working. That is an insane difference.
Yeah. So is it about the focus and awareness of reward on almost like a daily basis versus leaving it to a quarterly assessment or an annual review or something like that? Like you're just much more present with how are they doing on a daily basis?
Yes. And just like this podcast, Christiana, you gave me the questions you'd be asking me, and we talked about it a month ago. And then it's right there on a Google Doc. So that really worked.
I love that.
That's simple, right? Because you want your guests to be at their best, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, that's super interesting, and I'm sure. So, and then the sixth one, trust. Do people trust that you're dedicated to the mission? And you also kind of hinted at like how do they handle ambiguity, right? Is that part of the sixth one, or is that sort of a separate, overarching secret sauce?
Like, you can have a lot of ambiguity if you know what the end game is, what excellence looks like. Like, we're going for market share instead of profitability. So then that strategy guides my decision, and we can have chaos, we can have ambiguity, but we all know where second base is. We all know where home base is. We know who the catcher is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that matters so much, right? Because if people don't actually have alignment on those things, then they're potentially all working in completely different directions.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so it's interesting that this is BFO, big flash of the obvious. Anybody who's led teams has heard about these things. The difference I see is leaders haven't been measured against top leaders across industry and gotten that kind of feedback so that they can adjust and then retest.
Hmm. And so you mentioned also before when we were talking about this that when leaders are leading from being in the zone, that there's also a tangible effect on like stress levels. Like you can see a real difference. Can you talk a little bit about that part of this?
Right. So just to give some context, after one has become a competent or an expert leader and maybe you're using a formula. Then going into the zone, right, which is the beginning of stabilizing as a virtuoso leader, you're not going to be relying on knowing the right answer. You're going to start relying on your connection between people. And you're so competent that you have muscle memory in those 6 things. We talk about muscle memory in sports. As leaders, we have muscle memory in the correct conditions that are going to bring forth that discretionary effort. So then we can leave our mind, our thinking about the right answer, our attachment to a formulaic approach. We can move into curiosity, and we can get curious. I wonder what's going to happen in this meeting. I wonder when I lead my town hall meeting today, I wonder how the audience is going to react. And literally, your attention is not on yourself. Your attention is on what's going on with the people and the situation. So our attention is out versus in our heads. Now, as a virtuoso, you can go back into your memory if you want, and it will temporarily interrupt that flow. But people who go into the zone, they'll say, wow, I can't believe I said that. Whoa, that was really brilliant. How did I know to say that?
I love it. So it's, as you're talking about this, I feel like there's a lot of similarity to how one handles a coaching conversation, where you maybe have a certain framework of questions that you're going to ask. But if you're focused too much on the framework and you're focused too much on the structure, you miss the nuance of the energy in the room, or the body language, or the signals that someone else is giving you, and being able to adapt and say, hey, I noticed the shift, what's going on? And to get curious about, what does this person need right now?
Exactly. Because you may have an agenda for a meeting, and oh my gosh, that person just had a fender bender on the way to work, and they're still reverberating that word from that minor accident, or they got news. And as a leader, as an expert, if you're focused on the task accomplishment exclusively, you're going to miss the signals that are going to take you into virtuosity. If you're in the zone, you're more likely to see what's actually happening and say, is this really the optimal time? Should we just push through it? Like, again, that situational time, place, condition assessment.
Yeah. And I love the idea of just shifting the focus away from how am I performing to what does the group or what does this individual need? How often are we just stuck in our heads thinking about, how well am I performing right now? What are other people thinking about what I'm saying? How do I look? Did I sound stupid? Did I say too many times? Versus, what is the message that this person or group needs right now? And am I expressing something that is going to be helpful to them? Am I helping solve their problem? Am I noticing the things that I need to notice about this group of people? That is a tough one. It really is. But I love that challenge to say, how often are you operating in an outwards positioning versus an internal?
Yes, while also keeping that mission focus. So again, virtuosos can rise above paradox. We need to have this done by Friday. My person is not present, or this isn't a good time. My schedule is packed. So now we're in a paradox, right? But when you're in the zone, you're much more able to be in the context of both and in the connection, in the dialogue. And then creativity shows up because the cortisol is down, you're not so stressed.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the word curiosity several times, and I know that you call it like connected curiosity, where people are sort of collaborating in a really open way, and they're not so attached to the outcome that they can't do something new or have a new insight. So how do you help leaders to actually cultivate this environment of connected curiosity?
So it's really challenging. And what I loved about my mentors, they said, if you are going to leave being an expert leader, consultant, coach, to move into virtuosity and onto mastery, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you having the right answer, predicting certain types of outcomes, and you're going to need to become a beginner. And I mean a beginner. So if you think of Tiger Woods, he injured, he went from one handed, using one arm for golf swing to another. I mean, that kind of beginner, not that you don't remember all of your training up to expertise, but the biggest reason people don't get stuck, for some people, being an expert is great. I'll live the rest of my life. I love it here. I have the identity. I'm the go-to person. For other people, it feels like a dead end. Where do I go from here? The thing with virtuosity is you're 100% committed to those outcomes and you're not attached.
So do you have an example of what that would look like in the workplace? Like just a client you've worked with or a story that would help us understand like a completely different way of handling a situation as a virtuoso.
It's a difference between I'm going to fail, my ego's going to be shattered, that kind of fear versus focused on the result with this incredible focus. So last week, I was working with 10 leaders on progressing their 2025 goals. And I said, could we do it with improvisation? Could we throw some improv games into discussing how you're progressing on your quarterly and annual goals? And I actually didn't know how it was going to go, but I knew that by now they're seeing the challenges, maybe even feeling a little defeated. So if I could get them again out of their heads into a creative place of play, then they could see their challenges from another filter. Mm-hmm. And that would have them still focused on the outcome, but not be attached, not have the pressure. Because as a virtuoso, you talked about stress, the pressure comes off and it's replaced by focus. In fact, I know I'm going to walk into these leaders, they're going to be pressured. Yeah. So do I have the confidence to say, would you be willing to include improv games as we progress your goal and look like I am out of my mind? And I was out of my mind, literally, but I was focused, right? And so they looked at their goals like, all right, if you were an engineer, how would you see this problem? If you were a ballerina, how would you see this problem? If you were unlawful and you did something that was unlawful to get to your goal, what would that be? And of course, they came out of their knowing, started laughing, got into the zone. And so they said, could we do this every month in 2025? Because they got into the zone.
First of all, I think that is so delightful that, your approach is to come into what I think probably most corporate organizations feel like from the outside, which is very intense, full of pressure, very, kind of rigid structure. Probably by necessity in many ways, but you're kind of coming in and you're just blowing it up a little bit at saying, okay, let's put all the structure away, let's put the pressure away, let's take all of that, but keep our goal in mind and like go in every direction potentially.
Yes, and that is, I mentioned the cost and how much I appreciated my mentors saying, if you want to pursue virtuosity, you're actually going to leave cultural standards and create new standards, and people are really going to need to trust you. So you're really going to need to focus on results. That's the same. So that's why I'm saying, like, going into a virtuosity in any field, whether it's sports, music, art, podcasting, whatever it is, you're not leaving your expertise, you're just detaching from it so that your brilliance, what is unique about you, can come out.
Yeah. There's something beautiful about just the importance of play and how like quick we are to abandon that or to say, well, now that we're at this level, play is not acceptable or we don't have time for play. But really, you're sort of disrupting that in a major way and saying, no, actually, this type of play or like focused play with a certain intention is the path. Like that is how you overcome some of those stressors and barriers and blockers,
Mm-hmm.
even all the way up to the executive level. Like there isn't a level that is exempt from this strategy, correct?
Correct. And in fact, a professor, I want to say Dr. Charlie Spielberg from the University of Florida, he did a study on air traffic controllers, which at the time was the most stressful job in America. And guess what the top teams had that differentiated them from typical teams?
I don't know.
Making jokes. Making jokes, like throwing Nerf balls, ribbing each other,
Yeah.
right? Practical jokes, because they took the pressure off.
Hmm.
So when it really counts, pressure is not your friend, focus is. Extreme focus, not pressure.
Yeah, this is really well aligned, I think, with a lot of the experiences that my audience would have coming from different organizations like Amazon or Target or different places like that, where in the design process we have this sort of discovery phase where the intention is to kind of wander a little bit, to explore broadly and to have multiple options and to not decide in advance like this is the right path, but to force ourselves to say like, okay, I really like this option, but I'm going to force myself to come up with 5 to 7 other options just to see, have I really explored this fully? And when you do that, inevitably you're always going to get a better product at the end versus when you're confident like, well, this is the best solution. I'm going to go forward with idea 1. We're going to just make it, and then later on during the process you learn, oh, I didn't anticipate this, or I didn't really think it through, or that was clunkier. It could have been easier, more streamlined. And so I think there's a piece of that thinking that's really baked in there, but I love that you've expanded it. It's not a design exercise. This is a creative play that applies to any type of role, right? Like technical roles, business roles, executive roles, and things like that.
I
I
love that.
love that.
That's such a great takeaway is, yeah, you think you have the right idea or the best idea. Let's push for 5 more, 6 more, 7 more.
So, okay, I have to dive into improv because personally, that is an area that makes me feel super awkward. Like the idea of doing improv with my coworkers. I love my coworkers in general, they're amazing. But how do you get people who are used to being serious and straight laced and like, no nonsense, get this done, here's my agenda, to do improv?
Mm, great question, because it is counterculture. Not every organization is going to say that. And even when you ask people to do that, they'll say, well, isn't that a waste of time? I've already got 5 more things I can't get to this week. So in organization change management, I know we study change. It's really great when you have sponsorship, when lead by example. So if I see a leader or someone I respect or an expert in the organization, whoever, someone that's well respected, using improv to get to the result, number one, I have permission.
Mm.
Like, because inside people, think that they don't have permission if they play, because how many times have we been scolded for not paying attention? Instead of early childhood, learning is all about discovery and play. One of my clients who set an industry record, it was so important that their client wanted them to construct a natural gas plant in 30% less time that had ever been done, according to the Project Management Institute. So I go in like I typically do and do a needs assessment. The CEO said, "Can you help us with that?" And I said, "I don't know. I've never done this. I do know my toolkit, my tool chest is robust, and I'd love to engage with you on this. My thing that I love is let's set an industry record. Like, why not?" So anyway, I watched their town hall meetings, and it was a huge yawn factor. I mean, I had trouble staying awake, and I needed to learn their business. And people in the elevator, "Hey, I'm a consultant. I'm lead, facilitate change. Oh, things will never change." And big legacy employees, 20-year. And so I knew that number one, we needed to engage people. Number two, there's a mindset. Nothing's ever going to change. It is the way it is. And number three, there is these intense silos between engineering, procurement, field construction, huge silos. So I had a relationship, had a few wins with the CEO, and I said, "Would you mind if we started turning your company meetings into comedy shows? What I would like to do is use Saturday Night Live sketch comedy to say it, or to say, if we fail at this, here's what's going to happen," which is a good source of humor. And I said, "What if we say these three key points through sketches or a song parody or props but I was pushing the envelope, and he actually said yes.
Wow.
And I said, "I know this is really out there. Would you and the executive team mind being the actors for this?"
I'm trying to even imagine this world where something like this would happen. It's so great.
And he happened to be an Eagle Scout or Boy Scout leader in his personal life. So he loved the idea of the arts or doing things, skits or whatever. He actually loved the idea. And so I said, "We'll just start small. Like, we're not going to just a very 3 to 5 minutes, something new in your next meeting." And he's like, "That's a small risk." So we did it. Well, guess what? People are they're leaning in their chairs. They're laughing. "I cannot believe that so-and-so dressed up with like a wig and showed themselves incompetent and failing. I know them as always being right."
Yeah.
So what are we doing? We're leaving the knowingness of the past, and we're opening, what if I don't know this person as well? So fast forward, we even rented out a comedy club for the night, invited families. The senior staff did a kind of a talent show. And I'll always remember at the end of the night, this gentleman who was a new engineer fresh out of school came up to me and he said, Patty, guess what?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "I went to the CEO and I told him what we need to fix in engineering. I told him, and you know what? He wanted to know. And I wasn't afraid to go up to him during the break and tell him what I really wanted to tell him." Now, this company went on to, they completed that project in 28% less time than ever the performance management. And the humor allowed people just to be people and to get to know each other outside of that fixed frame.
Yeah. That is such a cool story on so many levels, but I think what really resonates with me is it creates an approachability to how people at all levels can work together to solve a common problem rather than I'm in charge, you need to do what I say, or you need to get my approval, or, a lot of the other ways that often leaders are perceived or employees are maybe trained to approach them. So that kind of breaks through all of that hierarchy that was blocking. Maybe that's what you were saying before, the bureaucracy that's blocking people's access to solving a problem.
And even with that situation where we did the goals, progress your goals, the first thing I had them imagine is you're not in the office. You are at an amusement park. You are at a restaurant bar that you enjoy, or you are at a dude ranch. So take anywhere but the office, because our mind likes, we call it regularity. Our mind likes, we want certainty. We can't have that in life. So we create regularity to have us feel secure. So of course we want that. And then how do we build on that? Let's create uncertainty in a safe way, still focused on results. At the end of the day, it's one team headed in this to the same destination with flexibility. And that's why, going back to those 6 key criteria, that you can create those high performance environments on the foundation of here's what we need to produce. Now let's get out of our heads and get creative.
I'm imagining there was a soul or two along the way who's like, I'm not funny. So how do I do this if I'm not funny? What do you say to them?
Oh my gosh, they're the best people. So I was working with one of our nation's top hospitals. And I said, instead of the typical holiday party with nice food and this, what would you think about a talent show that looks back on all we went through this year? Because they had implemented Epic medical records, huge IT transformation, really, really tough year. And so I said, I have a structure and boundaries. And so the CIO said, sure. So the most serious people, they got on their video and they did a Star Wars and in the, back in time. And we started and we had these legacy systems and blah, blah, blah. And so the standard was not everyone needs to be on stage, but everybody participates. So whether it's lights, video, scripting, costumes, come up with your top 10 list. And that holiday party, I left literally my stomach hurt from laughing because I had been with them that year. And so them making fun of themselves, it was the best.
Well, and those are like what core memories that you will never forget.
Yes. And ever. So exactly. And to this day, that CEO, he still has people calling him 20 years later saying, you are the best leader I've ever worked for. We had more fun in a hospital. Like, can you imagine? And now this was the IT department. So some hospitals I've approached humor and it was like, not at all. Like, no. And so that's their culture. So some of this does need to be led. Well sponsored.
I mean, that takes a lot of courage on every level, like especially as a leader saying, I'm going to make everyone completely get uncomfortable and out of their comfort zone and try something new. But like once you give permission to do it, I think people really have a desire to be creative. Like they have a desire to express themselves. And a lot of people have side hustles or talents. Like I think a lot about the people that I've worked with and how talented they are in all different directions.
Yeah.
And like, how come we don't see that at work?
Exactly. Like they sing or they play. My eye doctor, I just saw him in the band play. He's a lead vocal in a rock band. I'm like, ooh. But you're right. Like people have so many talents that they could bring to work. And I love to make it safe. Like the standard is everybody participates. And that might be bring 5 props to a meeting, like super, super small steps so that the zone has this parameter of it's challenging, but it's still realistic. So if it's too challenging, they're going to go into flight or flight. So again, this is going from expert leader to virtuosity, like knowing where to set those standards and knowing your audience. That's,
Yeah.
I made a lot of mistakes along the way until I stopped thinking about it. Look in the person's eyes, look at their breathing, look at their facial expression.
Are they going to pass out? Yeah.
And then leaving the room.
They found their exit. I did it in a small way. It wasn't like improv or anything, but I have started incorporating role plays more into different types of workshops, because I find that if I can get two people who are part of that team to stand up and do this sort of cheesy role play, everyone is like more emotionally attached to what's happening, because it's people they know, it's kind of funny or weird or whatever, and then they get to like laugh about it together, and it's like one of their own, right? And I don't know, it's just like a small thing, but finding those moments where people can connect with each other, and yeah, it like you remember it differently than
Totally.
if
That's
I was like an outside person coming in and then I was to read something to them. They're like, great, no emotional connection, but having their own people come up and role play it has been really fun.
that is, I love that idea. Love it, love it.
So I know that this is not all just subjective. Like, you actually have ways of measuring corporate humor to know if you're successful. Can you talk about, I think you have a ratio that you look for?
Yeah. So when we were when we were doing a comedy show called Environmental Hazards, mental being mind, we had 6 sketches that showed what happens in a work climate when these 6 criteria are not met. And failure makes for good humor, right? So in professional comedy and humor, my director said it's one laugh every 15 seconds. And so our key result or KPI was one out loud laugh every minute.
Hmm. One laugh a minute sounds kind of like a big deal when you think about like a typical hour-long corporate meeting. Like, how many times is anybody laughing? Like once an hour? So that's quite
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
big
Yes,
shift.
our show is 40 minutes. So, and we had great team. Same way a great leader is going to read their impact on the room. What's the impact I'm having right now on this person? Are they more motivated to get to the goal or less? Am I creating an environment of honesty?
It's interesting too, because it can be quite disconcerting to go in and say, I don't know how this is going to go. And, back to the theme of the improv, back to the theme of allowing yourself to be a beginner, the not knowing and going in and then just letting it play out feels like such a lack of control. Typically, we do plan. We plan every minute. We plan every agenda, every meeting, every 30 minutes, what we're going to be doing and how we'll accomplish those goals. And we work backwards from those goals. And there's just this absolute leap of faith required that, like, I have what I need. I have the skills. It's going to work out. The people in the room are going to help me get there. It requires a great deal of belief and courage, I think, to operate in that way consistently.
At the end of the day, we don't know where it's going to go. But what we do know is we're competent and we're committed, and here's what we can count on. And I'm a big proponent of pilots. Like maybe you did that with your role plays at meetings. Oh, let me just pilot this. If it bombs 5 minutes out of a meeting, no problem. We can all laugh.
Since making small experiments
Yes.
to test and learn.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
What's sometimes called fail fast, but I like learn fast.
Mm, yeah, I like that. So, if my listeners are thinking about, like, okay, I see a lot of value in being a virtuoso, what would be your advice? Like, how can they start moving in that direction?
Hmm. Well, the core, the foundation of our coaching programs is linguistic. We really get into how are you thinking and what we call the ontology of how you're thinking. So we've all been conditioned to focus on those results, drive to the task, how much can we get done? And that's a really good thing. If I'm at Starbucks waiting in line, I want to get my caramel macchiato or whatever it is. So that is not bad. Okay. It's just, it limits you in a doing task-based ontology, whereas the upgrade is not only what needs to be accomplished, but what's happening in the situation and what's the result to produce. And that will quickly, and then what do I need to perform at my best? Oh, I actually need a drink of water. Oh, I actually have an upset with my coworker. Let me go clear this upset. And now we can perform at our best. And that's what I learned from Dr. McClellan. What's the result? What do you need to perform at your best to get there in this situation? And are you speaking up?
Love that.
Yeah.
So, if my audience wants to hear more from you, where can they go to find you?
Thank you. You can come to my website, Patty Shull, SHULL.com, or you can call my business number. Somebody will pick up 713-446-8700.
Awesome. And some of the services that you offer, like you've kind of hinted at, the coaching and consulting and how you work with CEOs. Like if someone was out there and they just maybe wanted to do like an improv workshop or to get your take on like how could they change or shift the culture to be a little bit more flexible, what would be the best way for them to work with you?
Yeah, sometimes it's just simple. I want to compare my leaders. I want to see if I'm a competent leader or where those gaps are.
Yeah.
And it's a 30-minute online survey. It's less than $1,000. And it's 3 coachings. So we'll do the assessment, 3 coaching package under $1,000. And then you get to benchmark yourself against top performing leaders across industry. And I wish everyone had those opportunities that I had when I was coming up through leadership. And then, of course, we engage around change, AI. What is the pivot your organization needs to make? We'll facilitate. We come in and either I or my team, we facilitate that steering committee, that cross-functional team. And we run the communications and the OKRs and make sure the reward and recognition is in place and the clarity, those 6 things. So we engage with individuals, we engage with organizations, and then last year we offer a 12-week class that gives the linguistic unlock to move from personal conversations into conversations that support you stabilizing in the zone. And so that's a 12-week program.
Thank you again so much for just coming on and sharing all of your stories and all of the tools that you've used to help leaders and organizations think differently. I think it's such a unique approach. And there are just so many organizations that could benefit from this. So thanks for making time for me. If you are enjoying this podcast, don't forget to subscribe so that you get all the new episodes as I release them. You can go to worthytoleadpodcast.com/subscribe. And don't forget to share this with other leaders and friends in your life that need to hear these messages. With that, I wish you the best on your journey to becoming the worthy leaders that I know you are. Bye for now.